Alec, Peirce, Tech Tips, Scuba Tech Tips, back here at Simcoe Diving in Barrie, Ontario. Great little dive store, great diving area too. In fact, one of the leaders just came back from diving in Lake Simcoe. Not a 5-minute dive from here. Clear, shipwrecks, yeah. This very short topic is about DIN adapters, because I still keep getting calls from guys about DIN adapters and DIN regulators, and how do I change my yoke regulator so I can put it on my DIN tank and back and forth and so on. And it can be confusing, there's no question about it. It's increasingly confusing today, because not a long time ago, when tank pressures on steel tanks started to go up, DIN tanks, DIN valves became very, very critical. And but the old tanks are still around, so there's two different types of DIN adapters. Maybe you didn't know that. Did you know that there are two DIN adapters? Everybody says, well, DIN adapters are great because they're all the same. No, I got news for you. The other misconception that I hear occasionally still is when divers say that DIN regulators are better. Well, you know, you have to be very, very careful when you use the word better. Because in many circumstances, DIN adapters, DIN regulators are better. If the tank pressure is higher than 3,000 psi, they're not better. They're mandatory. You have to have a DIN fitting, because at high pressure, a DIN fitting is more secure. At lower pressure, it doesn't do any good. A waste of time. It'd be like putting racing tires onto your Volkswagen Bug. Well, Volkswagen Bugs race now. But anyway, you understand what I'm saying. There's no point having an extreme high pressure fitting on a low pressure tank. Waste of time and money. However, some of the questions are legitimate. So if you have, as an example, a yoke type regulator like this one. This is a yoke type regulator. And this yoke type regulator goes onto a yoke type valve, just like this one. You all know how this works. I'm not showing you anything new. That fits over there. The knob screws into the dimple onto the back, and there's your regulator, and it hoses in, away you go diving. It's fantastic. And when you put that on there, this smooth, you see how easy it is? This smooth metal face seals on that O-ring. You turn on the air, and away you go. This particular system using a yoke is restricted to 3,000 psi or less. So that's fine. When I started diving, tank pressures were 1,800. And then in the early 60s, they went to 2,250. And then a little later, they went to 2,475. And then they went to 3,000. And then they started to climb even more. They went to 32, 34 is not uncommon, and then 35, and there's even higher pressure than that. But at one time, all regulators were yoke style, because the pressures were well below 3,000 psi, not a problem. And the only reason is not that this isn't strong. I mean, these are rated to 6,000 psi. The screw and the yoke, that's highly rated. But the way that the O-ring fits against that metal seat is not as secure as it could be. It's not what's called a captured O-ring. This is not a captured O-ring. A DIN fitting uses what's called a captured O-ring. And so it can withstand greater pressure. The O-ring is not likely to extrude, to pop out. So let me just show you that quickly. Supposing you have a regulator and it has a DIN fitting on it. Here it is right here. This is a DIN fitting. And it screws into the valve. And on the end there's a hole for the air, and there's an O-ring. You'll notice that this O-ring, Kevin, is completely sitting down in a metal channel. It's captured. So the metal actually on a DIN valve, the metal channel inside and outside comes right up against the metal of the valve. Then you turn the air on and the O-ring expands to seal that minute crack. That's called a captured O-ring. So if you want to put your DIN regulator onto this yoke valve, what would you do? Well, you could change the valve, but that means emptying the tank and taking this valve out and so on. But this particular tank, and many of them do now, the next time you buy a tank, make sure you ask about it. This valve, this is called a converter valve. There may be other names for it, I don't know. How about DIN yoke valve? DIN yoke. So previously, I could put a yoke regulator on it. And now I can put a DIN regulator on it. You see? So that's pretty handy. It solves the problem entirely. But what do you do if you have a yoke regulator and you want to put it onto a DIN valve? That's a tough one. That's the hard one. Because in order to do that, there's no adapter for that purpose. In order to do that, what you need to do is remove the yoke from the regulator. Actually, take the yoke right off. There's a big nut down in here. Take that nut out, take that yoke right off. And then you purchase from the manufacturer a DIN converter for your specific model, and you insert the DIN fitting into it, torqued down to the proper torque shield. And so now this yoke has disappeared, and now you have a DIN fitting in there, and your regulator will now fit into the DIN. Okay? If you already have a DIN regulator, a regulator with a screw type DIN fitting, and you want to use it on a yoke tank, that's easy. Before we talk about that, why would you want to do that? Well, it's very simple. You may have a DIN regulator for a simple reason. And when you're diving at home, locally, with your friends, and whatever, you may be using a tank that has a DIN valve. And so your regulator fits into your own tank. Your DIN regulator fits into your DIN valve on your own tank. Off you go. But supposing you're going to be diving somewhere else. So suppose you're going down to Australia or the South Pacific or some remote island off of Mexico to go diving, and you take your DIN regulator with you and you arrive at the resort. Then the resort is a little bit remote. They're maybe not right up to 2022 standards. And so all of their tanks, very commonly, are yoke tanks. They don't have a DIN fitting. Oh, what do you do? Failing them having a converter, well, what you can do is you can purchase this device, or they may have them there, and this is a DIN to yoke converter. It looks like a yoke, doesn't it? Well, this is interesting because this particular device will fit onto your DIN regulator just like that. You know what I'm saying? This is your DIN fitting on your DIN regulator. But now you've changed it into a yoke. And that yoke fits right onto a standard yoke tank, just like that. So changing a DIN regulator so it fits onto a yoke valve is quick and easy. Changing a yoke regulator to fit onto a DIN tank, a little more complicated and expensive. Those adapters are $100 at least. So a couple of things, what have you learned from this? Well, there's a couple of different types of valves. Now, by the way, I did mention earlier about the 200 and 300 bar, which translates roughly into 3,000 and 3,500 PSI. These DIN adapters, and there are differences. If you are able to find an older DIN fitting that was designed only for 200 bar, you'll find that the threads on that DIN fitting are short. Not very long. And they screw in, as the old DIN valves were, they screw in. See, they're not long like this is a long thread. They screw in, but they only go down part way. This long DIN fitting, a 300 bar fitting, is designed to fit into a 300 bar valve. If you try to fit a, let me get this straight here, if you try to fit a 200 bar fitting into a 300 bar valve, which might be there because the tank pressure is very high, it'll go down part way, but it stops. It won't seal, so you can't put your yoke regulator onto a high pressure tank. Anyway, I think you understand what I'm saying. The two different DIN fittings are not allowed to be interchangeable. Anyway, bottom line is, if you want to change your regulator, be it DIN or yoke, to the other style, be it yoke or DIN, it can be done quickly and easily. One way. The other way, it's a little more complicated. If you have any questions or comments, give me a holler down there and I'll see if I can't answer them. Most manufacturers do offer DIN fittings for their yoke regulators. They're not hard to find. Anyway, A little bit confusing. You sort it out or go online and check it out. And let me know what you think. A little bit of information from Alec, Peirce, Tech Tips. Talk to you soon.